Lebanese Ether, Freestyle Drive. What's going on, y'all? Got a real special guest with me today. I usually have hip-hop artists on the show spitting some dope rhymes, but I got a different artist with me, a culinary artist, my man Moody, the founder and owner of The Real Mother Shuckers.
That's right.
It's like an oyster cart business that you founded here in Brooklyn, New York. Are you from Brooklyn originally?
Yeah, actually, we on the way down towards my mom's house right now on Dean Street in Franklin. That's where I was born and raised at that house, you know. Yeah, so I've been around here. I've seen all of the change over here.
You know, you came through with the Coogee sweater, you know, Biggie vibe,
gotta
Brooklyn.
Gotta represent, you know what I'm saying?
with the Mother Shuckers logo.
All a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, man. We gotta rearrange them and make it oyster themed, you know?
Going to actually.
No doubt. So, I mean, you know, the reason, you know, you are an artist because I know you're into the arts, but you're also a culinary artist because, you know, when I've been to your business and had your oysters, it is like a work of art, the way you present the oysters, the way you make it, the garnishes and all that. Do you consider it an art form?
Well, yeah, I mean, what I picked up oysters from was from fine dining. So, like, when I was actually starting out in culinary, I was trying to get myself, work my way up the food chain, trying to learn about as much about cooking as possible from as many different types of places as I could. And that usually would be like, trying to get my foot in the door at some place that was, getting good reviews or good ratings, or just the fanciest place. Initially, when I was living in Florida, it wasn't that many fancy places, so I went to the first place that I could get a job. Then I was trying to get a job at like the nicest place that I could get a job at, just because I wanted to be able to learn. I want to have access to the food, access to the information. So I tried to get myself into the hotel. I got myself into the hotel that was out there. And started working there. Inside the steakhouse that was out there. And then that was like the introduction to dry aged meats, oysters, all these different kind of
all
things.
That fancy stuff.
Fancy stuff that I had no access to previous to that. Just not because it wasn't around, but just because my family wasn't into that type of stuff. So certain of those things, not necessarily steak, but like dry aged steak or oysters. Like my family wasn't into that. So and so at the end of the day, I wasn't really into it either when I started doing oysters. I thought it was gross because even though I did try it, my family did expose me to a lot of different things when I was a kid, which was important because I've never been afraid of majority of stuff.
Got you. Okay.
But when it came to eating oysters the first time, it was a texture thing and all of these different things, and it wasn't even it wasn't me being biased. It was just literally I was shucking Gulf Coast oysters. So those oysters, Gulf Coast oysters, have a very different texture. And
it's not the same as different oysters?
Very different, very different. We think about it like this. Whenever you got an oyster that's able to reproduce a lot, someplace that's like warm water, they're going to be constantly in reproduction mode. So those oysters are going to be a lot more creamy, quote unquote, but that's really because they're reproducing all the time. They never go into hibernation. They never hold on to all of this.
Are there people who like that type of oyster, or is it a low quality?
A lot of people. There's a lot of people who they just prefer to have a bigger oyster. They like the creaminess.
How much bigger than a regular, like let's say compared to a Blue Point oyster?
It's comparable. They're comparable. Yeah, I mean Blue Points grow relatively very fast. They can grow wild. It's also about the way that you farm. So any of these oysters, you can get a Gulf Coast oyster that's going to have a way different texture, body, all of those different things. But it's based off of if they're being bag grown and tumbled, or if they're being wild harvested, which is literally the farmer throwing the seed on the floor, which is like the oyster shells, the little baby oyster shells, throwing them on the floor on top of other shells and letting them kind of wild harvest, like how it would in nature.
Like natural.
Yeah, like
Is there? Do wild oystering still exist, or is it really all man?
No, there's no such thing as wild oysters. If you get a wild oyster, you're gonna get sick. Don't do that. All right. People got responsibilities to be able to. I mean, unless you're literally getting it from an area that's right next to an oyster farm. You understand what I'm saying? Because oyster farms are leased areas. These are areas where they're taking accountability for the toxicity of the water.
It's dedicated to oyster harvesting.
These people are responsible for the product for 2-3 years before they even make it to market. You understand what I'm saying?
That's how long the life cycle, or
that's how long the growth cycle is. So depending on what the oyster farm is doing, So and the region also, they can do it in a year or two, but at the same time, it's like the oysters go fast.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, like for me, right, shucking the oyster as a shucker, like I know what the quality of the oyster should be like because I'm going to break the shells and lose product.
Okay.
You understand? I'm going to be taking the abductor muscles and it'll be falling apart before they even get shucked.
So based on your experience of doing it, you could tell if the oyster is right to consume,
or what type of oysters that people should be actually putting out to market in the first place, because it's wasting people money to avoid.
Okay.
You know.
So it's really interesting that you weren't, your first experience with oysters wasn't really pleasant. You didn't really like it.
No.
You were in the restaurant business and you were working with oysters, but now you actually own an oyster business that you started in Brooklyn a few years ago. How did that transition happen from not liking it? Did you spit it out, or did you actually swallow it the first time you ate it?
The first time I spit it out. I mean, I chewed it and I tried to swallow it and I really couldn't. And it was because it was, like I said, it was a Gulf Coast oyster that has like a lot less salinity than the oysters that I prefer, and it was a lot more creamy and bigger than the ones that I wanted.
Okay.
Now, for me, what turned me on the oysters was getting my first Canadian oyster, my first Prince Edward Island oyster. I was like, what the? I've been shucking oysters for years, and I had never even thought that I was going to like it. I just got good at it because at the end of the day, it was a task that nobody wanted to do in the kitchen in a fine dining environment. So at the end of the day, it was like when I first got back to New York, and I was still trying to work in kitchens doing saute and grill, different kinds of quote unquote fancy places that majority of them not even around anymore. But working all of these different jobs and then finding out that actually just doing oysters alone as a responsibility, I'd be much better off either doing just steak or oysters rather than trying to do everything and trying to work my way up to sous chef. Because at sous, I'm going to be required to do 60 hours a week and be literally up underneath somebody else and their whole entire plan. As even just as the oyster chef, quote unquote, or the lead line of the oyster bar, I'm running my own show. I'm dealing with the customers, even though I'm not getting paid for it.
Okay.
But
you're still working under the establishment and not as an independent.
Well, I'm not a server. I'm not given the same credits as being a bartender or a server, even though I'm responsible for dealing with customer interaction and upselling. You understand? Because a raw bar is direct. It's in the front. If it's done correctly, it's something that people can come to. It's kind of a gregarious thing where you can come to the place, pick out your food, and watch it get shucked.
That's true.
Live in front of you.
Yeah.
It's live food. It's not something that's
in the bag being cooked. You don't know what's
it's
going on.
It's literally a live animal.
Yeah.
It's literally a live animal that I'm shucking and I'm giving to you. It's literally you're getting something as fresh as it gets, without me taking a mallet and pulling a fish out of the tank or taking a cow and shooting it in the back of the head.
Got you.
You see what I'm saying? So in terms of what the services that I'm providing, it is kind of very much so like a fancy thing.
Yeah, I mean that's what people pay for, right? The fancy element of it.
Well, that's the reason why I'm trying to reverse this thing.
Got you. That's why I want to have you on the show, because the history of oysters in New York isn't one of it being fine dining and fancy necessarily.
So that's where this guy Thomas Downing comes in. The guy who inspired me to really get into doing this. Thomas Downing was a black man during the time period of slavery that he was literally more successful than majority. He was one of the most famous people in New York City during the time period of slavery as a black man, son of a freed slave, for his oyster business. During a time period when there were so many different people that had oyster businesses, white, black, all kinds, none of them reached the level of success that he had. He had literally gotten presents from the Queen of England because of how...
That's amazing. Yeah, that's
the Queen of England, from being like, somebody who was raking oysters. Make a left here, sorry.
Okay, that's all good. Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Somebody who was raking oysters up down in Virginia, I think, or the Carolinas somewhere, to being, in Washington D.C. doing some farming, and then going from that to opening up a restaurant. That's like.
So this is a man whose parents were enslaved.
Yeah, his parents were literally slaves to a man who released them, I guess, upon his death or something like that.
Okay.
And then once they got their freedom, their kid was born a freed man. So Thomas Downing was born a freed man, learned about oystering, took it up, and then what he did was he elevated it. So as what my issue is with it is kind of what he not he specifically
Yeah,
did,
yeah.
but yeah, kind of.
I mean, I understand. Like you're, reading on your story, interviews with you, where you want to make the oysters common for everybody again, like it used to be.
Well, what he did was he turned it from being a common man thing into being a high end thing.
A fine
He,
dining
yep,
type of thing.
he turned it into this gentleman's arena where it's like, people were coming through and they were having this oyster dining experience that was beautiful, as opposed to where they had previously looked at it as only being basically what oyster bars were, was like the red light district. Make the left right here.
Okay. Yeah.
There was like the red light district. So when people were, where people sold oysters, they sold alcohol, they sold
Okay. Yeah.
women as well.
Okay.
You understand?
So it's like these cellars in Manhattan.
Right,
Is that
right,
correct?
right. Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there was these cellars in Manhattan, and oysters at the time was relatively cheap.
Yeah.
At the time, it was like a street food or the cellars, and anybody just walking by could just grab a dozen oysters for like a few cents at the time. A few cents,
they could get food, they could go get drunk, they could go get laid. It was like the common man's bar scenario.
Okay.
Bar scene out there.
Now here comes Thomas Downing, comes from the South, travels to New York, and kind of markets it as a fine dining.
Well, the thing was that at those time periods, right, when you think about it, the oyster men were making money because these oysters were getting sold. Like I just said, this is something that was a packaged food during the time period that wasn't packaged. You could also bottle it and sell it across, across the states, and it will last and be something that was really highly desirable.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bottling, canning, all that kind of stuff like that. Before canning was bottling, but that was all factory industry was canning, Bottling was, previous to factory, and so you could sell bottled goods to across to England, across the United States, to the places that didn't have food, let alone have something fine dining like an oyster. Not necessarily fine, but like a delicacy at that time period. Especially for somebody that's in the woods, in the middle of the somewhere.
You want to pause the interview now and do what you're doing? Then we'll restart when you get back. Freestyle Drive with Moody, the owner of the Real Mother Shuckers.
A few moments later.
Alright. Oh, thank you, man. It's the thing that you made, the new,
It's your cat, babe.
No doubt. Shit is hot. Mother Shuckers. Mother Shuckers, motherfuckers. These are face masks right here, or nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open this shit up. So how did you come up with the name Mother Shuckers?
Honestly, it's the stupidest thing. It's like the easiest one, the easiest name. That was the name that I wanted to use at first. The first time I came up with a company name.
Okay.
But I was nervous to use it because I thought like it was going to be too crass. And people,
I got you. I was gonna ask you, was it controversial or like,
I don't really care at this point. It's like
yeah, not this point now. Yeah.
It's like when I first started, when I stopped looking for other work in the kitchen besides doing oysters, and people would ask me at like a bar or something, what do you do for work? And I'd be like, I'm an oyster shucker. And they'd be like, oh, you're a bad mother shucker. It was like the stupidest joke, the worst joke that 9 times out of 10 somebody was gonna come with it.
Got you. Yeah.
As soon as I say the word shucker, they'd be like, oh, you're a bad mother shucker.
Okay. So you kind of ran with it. You're like,
so
hey.
I was like, yeah, screw it. Like.
So you were kind of tired of working in a restaurant business and not getting the due credit you kind of deserve for being the front person running the raw bar. You were like, F it, let me just do my own independent business. Is that what kind of pushed you to?
Yeah, it was like basically I was doing raw bar, and in raw bar in restaurants, basically like I said, you're kind of like a bartender, but you don't get any kind of bartender benefits.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, my construct was a lot of people would be coming inside of these places asking if I could do private events all the time. Why don't I just design the ability to do private events so that I can take those clients when I get them? And so I did that a few times, and really what I did was start off asking bars if I could set up inside their bar with this little box. I built like a little tabletop box.
That's how it started off.
Yeah, no tabletop boxing. I called the company Marauder Shuckers instead of Mother Shuckers. Marauder Shuckers, and then changed it again to Master Shuckers.
Okay.
And then I was like, screw that. Let's just use the name I want to say instead of trying to keep on saying these, silly names that don't sound right. Let's just say the name I want to say.
Mother Shuckers.
Mother Shuckers.
And that's because people were telling you a bad mother shucker?
You're a bad mother shucker. Nah, it was the most annoying thing, the most annoying corny joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then at the end of the day, one day I'm at the bar and this guy who he was really actually kind of funny, this guy Ken, he came up to me and was like, I got it. Your name, Mother Shuckers. And I was like, you're actually right, but I already came up with that, but actually you're right. I'm not gonna.
That it made sense. It made sense.
You're absolutely right. I've been trying not to say it the whole time, and that's absolutely what it is. And that's what I've been saying, and that's it.
So now it's Mother
it.
Shuckers.
Yeah,
on Instagram, the
print.
real Mother Shuckers. Yeah.
I'm about to put it on my chest.
Okay. Tattoo? What do you mean?
Probably on my arm.
Okay.
Like that.
All right. Who designed the logo too? The logo's super dope.
I did that.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, logos take me a long time. They take about maybe like almost 2 years for me to really feel solid on the logo when I have something that I'm branding. But everybody seems to like my logos.
No, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, back to the history of oystering in New York City.
Yeah.
So, Thomas Downing elevated it. He had diplomats coming to his establishment. You said royalty, Wall Street people, rich people, whatever. They'd bring their ladies there because the other spots weren't necessarily lady friendly.
Well, this is the thing about it. It's like, let's say like this, right? So certain foods, like I was saying, oysters and whale. Whale was like so big in
Whale
terms
meat?
Whale oil.
Whale oil.
Whale
Okay.
oil, dude. Whaling and oystering was like the two biggest industries that you could get into financially based off of what we had inside the region naturally. Long Island was built on whaling money.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole entire Hampton, Sag Harbor, all that stuff was built by, guys on canoes out there catching whales and bringing back drums and drums of oil to sell across the world. Because previous to factories, squashing down things into oil or, drilling for oil and processing it, oil came from whales, bro. Came from animal fat.
So you have to kill the animal and take the flubber and turn it into oil. Okay.
Cook it down.
Okay.
So basically, all of the the rich people that were inside of the city at that time period were here to do trade for, let's say, potentially villages. Like, let's say you had a whole entire village that you were in charge of, a whole town, a whole area that you had to feed people, get them, keep their lights going. You had to come and buy drums of oil and get those contracts back.
Okay.
So that's how the stock market got started over here, is because all the trading got started over here.
Merchants and all that.
Literally oysters and whales, dude.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
and
amazing.
The crazy shit
Yeah.
about it is those black folks that had those initial contracts. The people who initially had the contract to do oystering from the cities would be like a whole bunch of people that had contracts. This is like stuff you can look up, but like a lot of them would be black people during the time period of slavery. There's would be freed black people that had contracts with the government to be able to go out and rake oysters.
Did these individuals get into it because it was a mean of survival at some point, and
It's
then
because
it kind of
history,
became?
because it's what they. At the end of the day, like I was saying, back in the days of what we would call native people or tribal people. Okay, everybody's tribes. People ate oysters, bro. Imagine you had to go for a day or two. You didn't know where your next meal's coming from. Imagine how invaluable a rock that has food inside of it is to you.
So true.
You understand what I'm saying? And then besides that, for all intents and purposes, what oysters have, everything that you need in terms of eating what would be considered a protein and an animal, like iron, copper, zinc.
Okay.
Okay, all of the different things that you would literally have to drink blood or eat a liver in order to get as
Understood.
a person.
You get it from this little
You
shell.
get it from this little shell. So even somebody who would elsewise be malnutritioned, because the liver don't get around to everybody. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So these people have developed expertise in oystering and you know, seafood in general, and they kind of ended up getting
They came
government
from it.
contracts.
Yeah, they came from it. It's literally like they came here. They were dealing with the natives. The natives were eating this way. The natives were living this way. The natives were building islands using oyster shells, bro.
We're talking about Native Americans.
Natives of all places.
Okay.
Literally here, yes, Native Americans.
Okay.
You know? But literally, the people who were here previous to us getting here, they were using oyster shells to stop irrigation. The oysters are... the oysters are the natural estuary, the natural nursery for all of the sea life inside of the ocean. You understand?
So it maintains that balance.
That's
that
where they hide.
ecosystem.
That's where everything hides. All of the stuff that crawls on the oysters.
Okay, yeah.
That's eating, trying to get in the oysters. That's digging around the shells and living in the shells and doing all that. That's all of the bottom of the. That's what's sustaining the life of the ocean, bro. It's from the tiniest thing that the small fish eat to the small fish that the big fish eat to the big fish that the freaking whales come. You know, not the whales, but you know, certain kinds of whales.
Yeah. I mean, at that time in the New York harbor, you were able to eat oysters from the harbor. Is that correct? In the 1800s or so? Is that at that time where there was oyster beds in New York?
Bro, but previous to factories, we didn't have any natural. The only natural resource that we had in New York City was oysters and whales. That's the only natural resources that we had here. We had massive natural resource, but we just depleted it. And then what we put here instead of natural resources was people by the boatload or chopped on top of it, you know, stacked on top of each other to work in factories. All right, so it's all about that trade. We became the natural resource.
Our labor.
Human labor, bro.
Yeah. So we kind of destroyed the oyster.
Yeah, we destroyed the water.
The
They
water
were just dumping
pollution.
everything from the water factories, dumping everything, just dump.
And it's still polluted till this day. Because I know you're part of a project, the Billion Oyster Project, where you collect oyster shells and dump them in certain parts of the harbor to bring back the oyster life.
All the oyster needs. Oysters is the most unique animal to me that I've heard of, period, based off of the fact of how that they reproduce. They are the only thing that we farm that's actually good for the environment. All right, so you can't even farm broccoli. Even if you vegetarian, oysters is more vegan than broccoli is.
Wow,
okay,
that's
that's
amazing.
because if you are vegetarian, your intention is to actually do good for the environment in what you're doing, in what you're eating. It's to be eating something that's helping the environment,
Exactly.
and not to be harming the environment. That's there's no religion that's called vegan.
Understood.
It's a choice. It's a choice, or
yeah.
it's a belief system that certain people have, but it's ultimately to the intent of not hurting the environment. All right.
Some people do it because they don't want to kill animals. Some people do it for environmental reasons, because other industries, like you said, factory farming, just industries in general, are pollute, fossil, burn, methane, all that good stuff that we hear in
all of the arguments
right
combined.
Yeah.
The most vegan food, as far as I would argue, would definitely be oysters.
So, what is the goal of this harvesting or putting oyster shells in the harbor? What is the goal of this Billion Oyster Project that you're part of?
So basically, the reason why oysters are so sustainable is because what oysters need to repopulate themselves by the million is an oyster shell, a piece of oyster shell to land on.
Wow. Okay.
So if you were to, let's say, take like two, this isn't how to do it. If you were to take one male oyster and one female oyster and put them inside of a tank, agitate them to start spawning, right? And oysters can become male or female during their lifespan based off of necessity.
Okay.
All right, but if you were to put one inside of one tank and another in another tank and get them to start, reproducing,
flirting with each other or
They just
whatever.
start,
Okay. Yeah.
What they do is literally just spawn into the water, you know?
Okay.
So while they're just literally spawning into the water, they're not flirting with each other, they're not moving around. They literally stay in one position and just start
effing.
spawning.
Spawning, I know.
Ejaculating, you know what I'm saying?
No, let's get to it. Let's do it.
Yeah, so bust it right
All right, I will. So these oysters that are being planted in the harbor, they're not going to be edible, but they're good for cleaning up the harbor. Is that my understanding?
Yeah. So what they're doing is they're taking these tanks, they're hatching the oysters inside the tank, about 1 million, and they're taking those little baby oysters and putting them inside of different parts of the ocean.
Oh, okay.
And what they need in order to be able to get the oysters to, successfully hatch and then grow is other pieces of oyster shell to adhere to.
Okay.
Well, what they're doing is collecting oyster shells from all of the restaurants across the city, and from individuals if they can get them out to a restaurant. But they're collecting the oyster shells from a bunch of different restaurants, taking the oyster shells down to these different sites, and then using those oyster shells to create more new oysters, literally.
To kind of help clean all that pollutants that's been in the harbor for like the last 100 years or so.
Right. One oyster filters between like 0 to 50 gallons of water a day, depending on its maturity,
Do you think we'll be eating oysters from the New York Harbor in the future at some
I
point?
wouldn't suggest it.
Okay.
Not just due to the traffic. Yeah, just due to the traffic.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we get oysters from New York area, and they're amazing. We don't need to get it from
The harbor
Manhattan
itself.
And,
Okay,
we don't need to get it from Manhattan.
Okay. So you're supposed to be in a new Netflix special or documentary about oysters?
It's not about oysters.
Okay.
It's about black food history. So that's what I was talking about Thomas Downing for it, but really also the fact of how black people have a rich history in oysters and oystering, and that we don't know that much about. Make this right.
Okay. When I linked up with you, or clicked the link in your bio, as they say, read an interview with you, that led me down the rabbit hole about reading about Thomas Downing, his amazing history, about black people in America surviving off of oysters, and in his case becoming world famous, rich, big establishment, etc., and elevating the oysters to this fine dining experience. Even though I know nowadays goals is trying to make it for the common person, for anybody to access. When I first learned about it, is my wife, I'm gonna give a shout out to my wife and do a plug here, started a petition about Staten Island, about Sandy Ground. And I know you're familiar with that history as well. You've been down there, and it's kind of, there was people oystermen who were using that to survive basically, and as a business, sell whatever. And it's like,
these are the first houses that were built. This is how, even though this sounds like a small thing, even if it was a shack, right? This is the first real estate. These are the first real estates that were developed.
In New York and Staten Island.
Period.
Yeah.
These are the first real estates areas that were carved out by people in this area that were, cohesively a block.
It's like one of the longest black settlements in the United States, I guess, right?
Yep.
Freed black people who were enslaved previously or descendants of slaves,
or people that escaped slavery.
People that escaped slavery
on the Underground Railroad. A lot of these places, AME Zion, that's a church name that you'll hear repeated constantly. But those are old school names, old school church names from during the time period of slavery, that they were part of an Underground Railroad that led people all the way up from the south all the way up here.
So my wife started this petition, change.org/sandyground. I'm plugging it. Basically, she wants this history being taught in the Department of Education curriculum in public schools, where kids should learn about this, especially because on Staten Island, it's a conservative borough, a lot of racism, history of racism on an island. People are MAGA, Trump, police, things like that, right? So a lot of these people, we went to college with a friend who was a descendant of one of the people who lived on Sandy Ground, and he kind of taught us about this years ago, and we were amazed years ago to hear the story. We didn't necessarily know about the oyster part and all that. We just knew that it was a settlement of freed black people who been there established for over 100 years or so. And it's interesting because on Staten Island you have this conservative borough, these racists, thinking they hate immigrants, they hate black people, they hate Muslims, they hate Arabs, whoever. There's a long list of who they hate, right? But then this mostly they self, if we want to be honest with it. But then this black community's been there way before these white people settled this area. These are second generation immigrants from Europe, and then they think that the island is their history when it really isn't. They were kind of late to the island, if you want to be honest about it. And
they relate to the whole party. The whole concept that anybody besides literally direct descendants of slave traders was here longer than black people was bonkers.
Exactly.
Unless you were a pilgrim or a slave, you got here late, bro.
So true.
Your
family came on a boat from Europe.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, you came here from wherever that your family got here from, but you guys all got here
later on,
literally trying to seek something beneficial. All of the black people that are here were brought here in the creation of, like I said, this whole entire country, to create the country in boats. We were brought here, so it wasn't like we had to get here. We were already here, bro. None of us got here. We were here,
So with the Thomas Downing restaurant, is it true that it was also a stop on the Underground Railroad, kind of like Sandy Ground?
Yes, for sure, absolutely. I mean, not of course. Like, he didn't have to be that person. He didn't have to be who he was. He didn't have to be somebody that was affluent and also somebody that was trying to help his people. But he was, and that's something that's dope too, and that's what I want to emulate as well.
So we're headed to the first restaurant where you kind of established your first cart. Can you talk about that?
Eugene and Co. So, Eugene and Co. is on Tompkins Avenue. Tompkins is where they have this beautiful block party, or were having this beautiful block party called Tamafest. And there's a lot of black businesses on Tompkins. And so...
This is in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
It's in Bed-Stuy. Very close to the area that I grew up, actually. And so one of my friends, my friend Lars, he introduced me to another person who we had worked with previously together on a boat, shucking oysters, that started working at Eugene and Co.
Okay.
And then that person, I gained a relationship with the owner. And after me and the owner hit it off, she asked me to come back after I did that first event for Tamafest.
Okay.
So Tamafest was like the first day I did Tamafest in front of her spot. Did Tamafest in front of her spot. Got to meet her, and then she asked me if I could come back with my cart, and that was my cart's first day out. And then after that, I was coming back every weekend and doing events at her space.
Nice. Okay.
With the cart. Yeah, it was really cool.
And now you have several locations, from my understanding, or two main ones, but you also have pop-ups at different restaurants throughout Brooklyn.
Yeah, so I still do events consistently at Eugene and Co. That also basically set up like stationed inside of Industry City.
That's how I got to know you, was in front of the Sahadis at Industry City.
Right.
And I was out there with my kids. My kids love oysters. They like all the expensive stuff. Even though I know you're trying to make oysters to be kids to like it, to be exposed to it, to be a common food again, the way it was in New York City, as we had discussed earlier, where it was a common street food. You just walk down the street, buy a dozen oysters, or half a dozen, whatever, and it was cheap, not expensive. Even though now we associate it with fine dining.
Well, I mean, fine dining adds to it, so that's what I do is like try to make a little bit of a fusion. So I wouldn't call it fine dining per se. Well, I guess it is still fine dining, but I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say fine dining. I'm not gonna go put a whole bunch of expensive, overly expensive things on it just to make it a price point differentiation.
Okay. Yeah.
What I would do is try to elevate it with light, crisp things, like light, fresh things, and very flavorful things that will make it a much more palatable experience for somebody who might not have tried it or enjoyed it previously, raw, and also for somebody who is very, very knowledgeable and does like them, but wants to have, a different experience.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, it was. I love the idea because it is easier access. Before you have to go to a restaurant, sit down, order a bunch of other things. Unless you just go to an oyster spot. There is a couple of those, but it is part of the whole fine dining experience. You get it as appetizers, then you get the main courses. So you end up spending more. Is part of the whole package. Whereas with your spot, it's so dope is that you can just be, hey, I feel like eating oysters right now. I don't need to have the steak and the shrimp and all that other extra stuff before, afterwards or whatever. I just want to enjoy a dozen oysters with my family or by myself, and they are delicious. I mean, I love how you have West Coast oysters and East Coast oysters. How do you get oysters? Like, where do you?
Right now, what I'm doing is actually sourcing directly from the farmers. So since the pandemic, I reached out to a few farmers in New York, and then I actually got contacted by a farmer in Alaska, Shakat Bay, the guys who actually made these patches.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, Shakat Bay oysters.
Those are Alaskan oysters.
Alaska.
Nice.
Yep. But they sent me a whole bunch of oysters for the first time, and I picked them up from JFK. That's how I get them still to this day.
Okay. I did see one of your posts where you're like, you took your electric bike or something, or all the way to JFK, and you brought them back with,
I do it actually on. I've done it on that thing like 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense. So
It
sounds,
is intense.
Yeah. I mean, I love your Instagram page. It's at The Real Mother Shuckers. Because I see you get very excited when like people who don't necessarily try oyster before try them for the first time, or kids, and you see their face, like these little kids like it. Like sometimes like you said before, sometimes if you might try it the first time and don't like it, maybe try it again because maybe it was that day, or maybe it was.
My suggestion would be to go for something that would be for a more northern oyster, regardless of whether it's an East Coast oyster or a West Coast oyster. Try the most farthest northern oyster that you can get your hands on, and then try it with some of the toppings that I suggest inside of my pages, and that way you can give yourself a fair chance to decide whether or not you like it or not.
Nice.
And keep a bucket with you. If you want to spit it out, spit it out.
Okay. But don't spit it out because they're delicious. Just give
They're
it a chance. Just give it a chance. So the northern, East Coast.
And chew it.
And
Don't
chew it.
swallow. Do not swallow. Anything that you eat, you should not swallow it. Just swallow it whole. That's ridiculous.
And what's the point then?
What's the point? Yeah.
So they're more mild, the northern flavors? Is that the northern oysters? Is that why you would say
Northern
try it first?
oysters, so think about it like this, right? Oysters, they are filter feeders, so they're cleaning the environment, but they're also literally they're the makeup of what the environment is. The farther north that you go, the closer we are to glacier water. The closer we are to basically untouched resource.
Understood. Not destroyed by human.
Not nearly as much as everywhere else. Then besides just that fact alone, the temperature difference. So when an oyster is in water that's below 40 degrees, it starts to hibernate. So it'll hold and sustain all of that nutrition that it would normally be losing if it's reproducing. So a northern oyster is going to have a much stronger abductor muscle because they'll be fighting to stay closed a lot longer. They'll be a lot more clean tasting.
Okay.
And in general, for me, it's just something more palatable, especially for somebody who's a beginner.
Understood. Yeah. Okay, we're here in Eugene and Co. We're in Bedside, Brooklyn. We're gonna go check out your cart or where you do the oysters. Check them out on IG, The Real Mother Shuckers. Anything you want to say before we do that? Any last, to the followers, to the listeners, to those viewing this, where can they check you out? Where can they, they want to hit you up for a private party? What's the best?
The best thing to do is just go on to Instagram. Add me on Instagram. You can contact me directly. Either myself or my manager will respond to you immediately, basically.
So your two main locations is Eugene and Co. in Bed-Stuy and Sahadi's in Sunset Park, Industry City. Nice. All right, we're gonna go check out the oysters right now. Moody, thank you again for being on the show. You know it's not over, but we're gonna take it to the second part. All right. Peace, y'all. Got some Blue Point oysters here. How do you come up with the garnishes?
It's trial and error.
Okay.
Man. Some of the stuff is fine dining stuff, just like, you know, some classic combinations that I know go together already, and then just trying out different things that I think will work, you know?
Nice. Okay. What is your favorite garnish? Is there one?
These two are my two favorites for introducing people to oysters.
Okay.
Then have some more advanced ones that I'll be coming out with for like private events, and I guess I could bring it to the cart too in the future, but really more so on like a trial and error type of scale again. Maybe just every now and then certain types of additional toppings, you know, just so I don't overstress whoever's working the carts, you know.
Gotcha.
I want to have a whole army of little Brooklyn boys out here shucking oysters.
All right, let me get some. How long you been shucking oysters for?
Now it's almost like 10 years, unbelievably. Almost. I got my dog in Louisiana. He's 10 years old. And that was where I learned how. That was my first time being exposed.
See it pop open. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Either way, I think you can grab from next door. Here comes fucking the anarchist name. Yeah. Do street art. Do a street art. Do a street art. Grab from next door. Yeah, do a street art. That counts. Oh, that counts. How's it going?
So I know sometimes you go out on the boats in Long Island and different areas to, what is it called to catch oysters? It's harvesting?
Yeah, harvesting. Yeah, basically, you know, you just go into the farm where they've already done all the hard work for you, and when you get there, you go through the bags and pick out the size of oysters that you want and put them into other little bags and bring them on back for the hungry people.
Unless we put a rope on it or something. Do you see the business expanding to other locations or?
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I said, I'm going to have people in the ghettos of America eating oysters for their first time. and loving it. I have oysters everywhere, so people who didn't know that they were gonna like it. You know, people who thought that it was somebody else's, a food that was for somebody else.
Freestyle Drive. I'm here with Moody, the owner and founder of the Real Mother Shuckers. We have this great experience right now with these oysters right here that he's shucking for me. It's gonna be a dope episode. Freestyle Drive, something different for y'all. He was gonna spit some bars too, but he's like,
I'll spit some.
he said it's been a minute though. He said it's been a minute. Yeah. Ah, beautiful, man.
Alright, you wanna hear some more?
All right, let me get this. Freestyle Drive with Moody, the Real Mother Shuckers.
Alright, here we go. Let's spit a little 16, alright? Yo. Hip-hop was supposed to be the future for the youth and for the music. Now they use it to subdue us and confuse us. It was a movement for the usage of improving the entombment of the hoodlum, get them using the medulla. Instead of shooting and disputing with the oozes and the lugers, we was choosing to diffuse it, calling truces. And so they viewed us as a nuisance, made excuses to exclude us from the groups that was more suitable for music. And we knew this, so we made it more inclusive and improved it for the nation of all human to approve it. From the dances and the movement to the bass and the acoustic, get the faces all elated with amusement. But now they chase us to recruit us and they rape us and they loot us. Slave traders turn the neighbors into Judas. And we take it and abuse it because we chasing an illusion to be famous like a gangster in a movie.
Woo! Yeah. Moody. Nice. Bars. Hashtag bars.
I still remember that one.
No doubt, no doubt.
Right.
You spit that over a beat originally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I used to do spoken word, not really spoken word, but like rap like that for this company, hospital audiences when I was like a teenager. And we used to go to different places like schools and hospitals and prisons and all kinds of places. And
Nice, okay.
you know, we would do like workshops, you know,
For the youth and stuff.
for the youth,
Yeah.
all kinds of different stuff. But what I used to do was rap. So I would rap, and then actually what I ended up doing for the company was getting paid to write raps based off of curriculums that they didn't have developed programs for. So I was like a program developer for them, you know? I was writing raps as a program developer.
Nice.
Go figure. Straight out of high school, you know?
That's dope. That's
Yeah,
dope.
it was fun.
You were a real hip hop head. Brooklyn night, right?
Yeah,
Real Brooklyn hip-hop head.
Brooklyn boy, you know, through and through, you know.
I'm here with Moody, the owner and founder of Mother
The Real
Shuckers,
Mother
the Real Mother
Shuckers.
Shuckers on IG. He made a special, beautiful platter of oysters right here.
Hell yeah.
These are Blue Point oysters, Long Island.
Maristella Blue Points from Long Island.
Nice, they look beautiful. Do I start? Do I just go in? Do
Get in, man. Let's go.
Let me just show them first. Let me show them how
Sushi
beautiful.
oysters, yeah.
Ooh,
These are the sushi toppings.
Nice. Look at that. Look at that. I don't want to lose none of that juice. Yeah. Cheers. So effing good. I don't want to curse, but it's so effing good. It really do taste like sushi. Those it's oysters, but it tastes like sushi.
The seaweed, the ponzu, the cucumbers, combination. Tricks to your brain.
It did trick your brain for a second. I love oysters, and look at that. Show them the show. I feel spoiled, you know? even though you're trying to make it the common food again, something fancy about it. I don't know what it is. Maybe because I'm just
common as shit though.
Yeah.
It's like, even though
I don't know what it is.
even though the taste is so fancy, even the dressings I put on is common shit.
Cucumber, seaweed, soy
ponzu.
sauce, or ponzu. Okay.
Yeah, that's the fanciest thing on it is the ponzu.
Ponzu, nice.
Because I pickle my ponzu with bonito dashi and yuzu. So it adds a little bit more
So those have a different.
flavor than your normal ponzu. But
These have a different garnish on them. What's the
yeah,
rest?
that's the classic topping. That's parsley, shallots, cocktail sauce, and
Look at that. Beautiful.
extra peppery.
Nice, nice. Cheers. That's really good. That peppery, that tasty. God damn, it's so good. That's what I'm talking about right here. Make sure you read about the history about oysters. Check out Moody. You got a dope interview online where he talks about how he got started. He's gonna be on, Freestyle Drive talking about his history and everything. He told me about Thomas Downing. I'm just amazed by that history. They need to make a movie or a documentary about him. I know you was interested in doing like a show or a playwright about him.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to do like a dinner. I want to do like a dinner play, and it would be about Thomas Downing. It would be about black history, oyster history, prohibition, cocktail, the building of drinks and.
So while people are enjoying the meal, it'll be like a live show type of deal.
The drinks from the time period, music from the time period, history from previous to the time period and the time period, and all of it would be basically being hosted by somebody playing the character of Thomas Downing. All you playwrights out there, you just heard it. I'll let the boy. Let's get it done.
The Real Mother Shuckers on IG. I want another one of these with the pepper.
That's my favorite one.
That is really good. This is really good. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm going in.
You get that one. I get this one.
All right. Thank you. I love the idea. Make sure you check out his carts. Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, in front of Eugene and Co. That's on what's the street?
Tompkins and Jefferson.
Tompkins and Jefferson, as well as in Industry City, Sahadi's. You got the cart over there too. You open Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Sahadi's. So come through, bring your kids. Everybody's gonna love this. Oysters are delicious. Try it. Don't hesitate. Don't think it's something weird or strange. You gotta try it first. You will fall in love with it. Thank you, Moody. It's the last one right here. Moody is spoiling me today. Oh man. Cheers. So, mother shucking good. You are now shucking with the best. Moody, the real mother shucking. I ain't come up with that. I was in his bio. Again, Moody, appreciate linking up with you today. It was great having you on the show. Freestyle Drive. It was a great drive, dope interview, and couldn't end it better with a dozen oysters. Thank you, my brother. Lebanese Ether, Freestyle Drive. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Next time, make sure you check them out. The Real Mother Shuckers on IG. Peace, y'all.